There's a lot of myths around dyslexia. One is that you read words backwards or you see letters backwards. Oh, my child flips B and D. That is like one of the first things parents are like, email me all the time and like, my child flips B and D. Do you think they're dyslexic? I'm like, no, absolutely not. It's actually how our brain is trained to recognize objects that like, if I take your pair of glasses and I flip them upside down, they're still a pair of glasses. If I flip them on the side, they're still a pair of glasses. We actually have to untrain our brain that the letters B, D, P, and Q are not the same thing.
Right.
And so it's like really a process of untraining your brain. So I wouldn't even say until second grade, your child is probably going to flip those letters around some. Another myth is that dyslexic people are not intelligent. And it's actually
The opposite.
Most of our dyslexic children are very intelligent, and that's why they go so long, usually until about third grade, before they're detected, because they figure out how to mask it.
Hey everybody, welcome to Wire Talk. Today's topic is a great one for so many different ages. It's about reading. Maybe your child is just starting to learn how to read, or they're in the process, or a little bit older, and they're just struggling. Well, today I have brought in an expert. She's going to give us tools and strategies on how to help our children with their reading skills. You know, maybe your child you think has a reading issue, maybe like dyslexia or something like that. I know Abby had that growing up and still does. And the tools that she learned truly helped her throughout her life and in college and even now in her workforce. So join us today. It's going to be a great topic on your child's reading skills.
Hello and welcome to Wire Talk. Today is a very special episode because we have a special guest, Welsley Jongko. Is that right?
Yes.
She says it's like you honk a horn and you put an O on the end. That's what she tells her students. And we are so excited for Welsley to be here today because she's going to be talking about everything about reading success in your child. So I'm very excited. And Mom, I totally stole your line because you were supposed to introduce the topic today.
Well, that's all right. Guys, we're talking about reading success.
There you go.
Success in reading. So tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your background? You're a teacher, right?
Yes.
And go ahead.
Okay. Well, like they said, I'm Welsley, and I am a mom of two boys. I've got a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. And so my 5-year-old is about to start kindergarten. So big things happening there. I'm going into my 13th year in education, and I've taught everything, kindergarten through 5th grade in some capacity. So I did ESOL for a while for English of speakers of other languages, and now I'm a literacy coach.
Okay, and what does that mean, a literacy coach?
So a literacy coach is someone who helps teachers in the school better their practices in literacy. So my district decided after COVID hit, and we saw kind of the learning loss that happened, my district decided to invest all of their money in early literacy. And so in training teachers in what's called the science of reading, which is this like vast body of research of how our brains actually learn to read.
Oh, wow.
So when that position became available, my principal asked if I would be interested in it. And I was like, I don't know if I want to leave the classroom, but I did. And it's just been so wonderful helping teachers. So I got to teach teachers, or I got to learn kind of the science of reading a year before everyone else, and then help teachers implement it and help them with curriculum that follows those practices. And just, you know, teachers will come to me and be like, I have this kid who I just can't figure out what to do with them. What are your suggestions? What are your ideas? So I'm just really there supporting teachers and helping them be the best literacy teachers they can be.
Oh, that's so awesome. And I would imagine with any type of teaching, but definitely with reading, when a child gets it, there has to be nothing better than that. Y'all are both teachers, so I'm sure you can speak into that.
Yeah, but I had them when they were already reading. So mine was more, I got them in 3rd grade. So most of them were already pretty fluent readers. But it is special when they do pick up something that they didn't know what to do before.
It really is.
Like Abby has dyslexia, my Abby. And we did not find out until she was in the 9th grade. Like I could start seeing something even in the 3rd grade.
Right.
Something wasn't right. She was a great reader until she hit 3rd grade. And then she hated reading. And actually, when she was learning her multiplications, she just could not get it. And I was just like, and I really thought she had ADD. And so then she gets into middle school. She's struggling in English. She's struggling in literature, all of it. So we had her do like a double course of literature in 8th grade, and that really helped. But then whenever she got to 9th grade, I told Greg, there's something wrong. I don't know what it is. She cannot process the way the other kids did. And I think she has ADD. So we went and had her tested and by a psychiatrist, and he said she does not have ADD. She's dyslexic.
Wow.
But she's a processing dyslexic.
Okay.
She doesn't mix up the letters, but it takes her 3 times longer to process than a normal person. And I was just like, but the fun thing was, I thought Abby was going to feel bad about herself, but she was so relieved. Like, there's a reason.
Yes.
And so then they did give us tools and strategies to help her, and it made a world of difference. She ended up doing well in high school, National Honor Society, went on to college, graduated. So that's why I'm so excited you're here today.
Yeah.
To just get the moms, like, what are the signs and all the things. You're going to help us on so many different levels.
Yes, absolutely. And I connect with that story so much. I actually am dyslexic too. And I did not know that I was I always struggled with reading growing up, but I didn't know that I was dyslexic until I got Orton Gillingham trained as an adult teacher.
Wow.
And when I went to the training and they started teaching all about, I had heard of dyslexia. Like I had a friend in college who was dyslexic.
Yeah.
And when I went to the training and they started teaching all the things about dyslexia, and then they started teaching like the systematic phonics and how you intervene with students who are dyslexic, I was like, oh my gosh, this is helping me relearn how to read. Like it was amazing. And I look back now on all my childhood struggles reading, and I realize I guess you're always dyslexic.
Sure.
Dyslexic. And I still struggle. You know, reading is still hard. It still takes me. My husband is like a speed reader. We'll both sit down to read a document. He'll be done in a minute, and he will process it all. I like have to sit and take notes. And so, you know, even as an adult dyslexic reader, I still read differently. You know, a lot of stopping to process and note-taking as I read.
That's so good. I'm excited about today.
And then for you guys who don't know, Welsley actually has a Instagram. It's called @LiteracyNook. So, and if you love anything reading or just like seeing a cute little face, it's so fun. I'm like, get on there. I'm like, oh, that's so exciting.
Well,
and
Emily's
that's
the whole
so
reason
amazing.
you're here. She was like, Mom, you need to follow this girl. She's amazing. And I started following you, and I'm like, oh. And then I think Emily said, and she's a Birds on a Wire mom.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, okay,
So,
cool.
and
Oh,
I mean, as a former teacher, I get giddy about it. I'm like, oh my goodness, that is so fun. I love the way you're doing that. But also, you make it fun too. You know what I mean? And that makes exciting. It makes me excited. I'm like, oh, that looks so fun.
I know.
Hey moms, it's Katie. I'm cutting into this conversation to let you know that Karen's latest study, Survival Guide to Motherhood, is being made available for the first time as a self-paced course formatted specifically for moms to access anywhere at any time. That means you don't need to be in a group to go through this content. In Survival Guide, Karen teaches moms with kids ages 0 to 5 in the home how not to just survive motherhood, but how to thrive in your role as a mom in this season. When you sign up for her self-paced course, you will get access to 6 sessions packed full of practical wisdom. In these sessions, Karen walks through the 4 areas of a mom's health. She addresses the problems that emerge when a toddler has taken the reins of control in the home, and she'll give you practical steps to take back charge of your home. She shares the personality colors material so you can learn what works for your child and their temperament. You'll also learn the 3 distinct discipline stages, and Karen shares what each stage requires, and she provides practical examples of how to apply discipline in that stage. This course is a curated toolbox full of practical biblical wisdom for moms with young kids at home. You can return to the videos and the reflection questions time and time again, and once you enroll, content is available for you on demand anytime. Head to boaw.mom/SGTM to check it out and get enrolled today. Again, that's boaw.mom/SGTM. Enrollment is open now, and it's going to be open until September 10th. Once enrollment closes, you won't be able to jump in for a while. So head to that website, check out the link in our show notes, and start thriving today.
Okie dokie. We have a question. First one is, I think a lot of moms might be wondering, why are we doing a whole show on reading? So we thought before getting school back up, it can be stressful, especially for moms who are going to the new going into the school system for the first time. That would be me too, because I've got a kindergartner going in, which by this time this episode airs, she would already be in school. But in real time, she starts next Thursday, which is crazy. But I'm very excited. Back on top. All right. So what are any tips for parents who may be feeling overwhelmed already as the year is getting underway?
I think with school, you really just have to take it one day at a time.
Yeah.
It's especially for those littles who are going to school, some of them for the first time for, 7 hours a day, and some of them go to after school programs too. It's a long day and their brain is learning a lot. Like they are learning all day, every day. So I think just, trusting your teacher, knowing that the reason that teachers are at school is because they love kids and they want your child to be successful. So if you notice that your child is struggling with anything, your teacher is your first partner. Go, send an email. Teachers want to partner with parents. And some of the greatest things that I've ever had come out of conversations with parents is just like, oh, I'm so glad you reached out so we can kind of work through this together and I can make you feel more comfortable with the situation you're in. But I really think, take it one day at a time. When your child comes home, make some special time to talk about the school day, ask them questions about their friends and what they did. What was, one of my good friends shared this with me. They do a high and low every day. And I love that. Like, tell me your high, tell me your low. And sometimes there's not a low and that's great, but it just kind of is a little bridge to open up the door to talk about whatever happened that day. And just really partner with your school.
Yeah, I love that. Well, let me ask you this. So some children just naturally love to read. They love to be read to as a young child. Others could care less. How would they foster a love for reading? Because reading's so important on so many different levels.
Right. So I think, one of the first things you can do is read great books to your child. So starting from really the time they're born, you can start reading those little board books during tummy time and that kind of thing, and read books that capture your child's interest. So I think it's also important to note that like a child who can't read to themselves doesn't like to read. Like nobody likes to do something that they can't do.
Yeah.
So one of the best things you can do, like I'm 34 years old and I still love someone to read a book to me. I think it's so fun. So do character voices and get into it. Read those rhyming, silly books. Like one of my son's favorite books is I Am Not a Chair. I don't know if y'all seen that
cute.
one. It's like this giraffe who everyone thinks is a chair in the jungle. And it is like the silliest book and it's just funny and fun. But he gets to see that books can be really fun. And so, sometimes children don't sit still for a book and that's okay. They can still listen and love that. Just play games. A lot of what we do and a lot of what I share on Little Literacy Nook is just that game playing. Like trick your kid into not knowing that they're reading, but they really are.
Yeah.
And so just making it all about fun. And,
That's
reading really is a life skill. And so not every kid is going to grow up and love to read as a hobby.
That's
it's
right.
great if they do, but in reality, it's kind of like swimming, you need to know how to swim in case of an accident or an emergency, but I don't really love to go swim in the pool.
Yeah.
Same thing with reading. You need to know how to read as an adult to do your taxes and read important documents, but you might not love reading as a hobby as an adult, but it's important to know how to do it.
Okay. That's good to know.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it too. Like, especially with the older kids, like even though you don't love this, you still have to know how to do it.
Right.
So I think even if you have a kid who's a little bit older, who's like, kind of want to do this, that's a good way.
And I think also as they get older, it's good to read them chapter books.
Oh, yeah.
And then leave the suspense. Like, it's time to go to bed. And they're like, well, what's going to happen? We'll have to find out tomorrow.
Yeah.
Tomorrow.
And that then they can't wait to jump into it the next day.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah. That's a good.
I feel like, there's so much learning how to read earlier and earlier. So, but do you think there's a difference between a late reader or is the same, like, okay, you're a late reader or you're a struggling reader? Is there a difference? Do you know really?
So I thought about this question a lot, and the way I originally thought about answering this question is kind of different than the answer I reworded in my mind on the way here. I was really thinking about it because What we know now with the science of reading, this vast body of research, is that 95% of kids can learn to read. So that 5% is kids who really, like they aren't able to speak. So they're not going to be able to read. They can't process language. So kids that have more severe disabilities. And so there's really I wanted to kind of break this into 3 different types of readers that might struggle at the beginning of the reading process. So you've got kids in every grade level. You've got kids on a span of birthdays, anywhere from August, depending on your state when the cutoff is. You might have a kid who has a May, June, July birthday. And so they're going to be on the younger side of their grade level. Because they're so much younger than their peers, everything might be a little bit later to come to them. They probably spoke 4 months later than the other kids in their grades because, when you're a baby, those milestone developments are huge until you're about age 2. So with kids like that, that's really the only kids that I would consider to be necessarily a late reader, just because they are younger than their peers. So then you've got kids who might be late to reading because they might have a lack of a literacy foundation at home. So, sadly, we get kindergartners who have never seen the alphabet or sang the alphabet song or, had someone read a book to them. So they don't know and recognize those early literacy skills. And so kids like that, once they hit kindergarten and they start learning, they usually pick it up pretty quickly because kindergarten, your brain just can learn so much so fast. So you have kids who are late birthdays, and then maybe kids who are a little bit later to start because they don't have that foundation from home. But really in kindergarten, if you have children who come in and they've been exposed to the alphabet, they've been read to, and they're not picking up automatically those alphabet letter sounds, the letter names, and as you start reading those 3-letter words, those consonant, vowel, consonant words, and it's just not clicking, that is really truly your first sign of some kind of reading disability. So when we think about a struggling reader versus a late reader, I don't know that a late reader is really something that truly exists, just because if they're late, it's usually either because they didn't have that foundation at home or there's something there causing them not to be able to read. And sometimes it's not necessarily a reading disability or dyslexia, like you were talking about with Abby, and she's not, but they might be ADHD, and that child is going to have a hard time focusing on saying letter names and sounds because their attention, they might not necessarily have a reading disability. So it's kind of a 3-part question there. But I do think there are some really early signs that your child could be a struggling reader. And what we know now is the earlier we catch them, the faster it is to intervene and make progress with them in reading. As you know from teaching 3rd grade, if a child in 3rd grade is struggling, it's so much harder to catch them up than if you catch them in kindergarten or 1st grade and can kind of close those gaps before the gaps become so large. So, there's some early signs if your child is struggling with nursery rhymes and learning their letter sounds. And then by 1st grade, if they're struggling with that automatic word blending, then those are kind of some of your flags that you might need to seek some additional help.
Right. Pay attention to that. So those would be the early signs you would say. Okay. Because I know with Abby, she was okay those early years. It's just as she grew. And that's what the doctor said. She's very smart.
Right.
To have masked it this long.
Yes.
But as she's getting into the higher level of learning, she's really struggling. So
yeah.
So I'm going to kind of ask a separate question that's not in the docket for today.
Okay.
Is it hard to not compare your kid, like compare Abby when she's struggling to the other kiddos in the classroom? And was it a hard step to take her to the doctor?
Yes.
Because it kind of was like,
yeah, that makes
really
total sense.
Making a good question, but
it was hard because I could see that Abby, this is the example that I always use with Abby. This is when I knew I had to do something. She had a science project and it was due, she had the whole weekend to work on it. And the other kids would have gotten it done within 30 minutes. And it was Sunday night, and she had been working on it all weekend, and she hadn't even really started. And I just kept thinking, what is the deal here? You know, she just cannot do this. And so that's whenever I went to her dad, Greg, and I just said, we got to take her to the doctor. There's something not right here. And so, and I felt bad for her because I was like, what if something's wrong and I missed it all these years? And so, but, you know, I just told her, we're going to try to figure out what's going on because everything you're feeling, you're a smart kid. And she was starting to feel very stupid. And I can't do this. I'm not going to even graduate from high school. College is just a no, it's not going to happen for me. And I was just like, okay, let's all just take a breath.
Right.
I don't think that's reality. Let's try to figure it out. And then once we did, and the psychiatrist said, okay, this is how you do it. When she reads, she also needs to listen to it audibly. So as she's reading, have the book audible and do it at the same time.
Okay.
And then he said when she goes into class, when the teacher, she cannot listen to the teacher and take notes. She cannot do that. So he said she can either listen and you need to ask the teacher to give her notes for the class because she was in high school at this point. So we did. We sat down. We got a 504. 504. We sat down with her teachers, her principal, the counselor. The school system was amazing with it.
Yeah.
And they were like, we're here to support you. We're here to help you. And they gave her all the tools and she started thriving.
That's
Great.
great.
And all that stayed with her through college.
Right.
So, but it was hard because, I felt bad. The other kids, especially her being under Taylor was practically straight A's on everything, got everything done really quick.
He was probably the smartest, not probably. He definitely was the smartest of all of us in every subject. Like, I thrived in math and science. Kelsey thrived in reading and social studies. But Taylor, he had it all. He was smart in everything.
Yeah, it all clicked.
He didn't truly have to work very hard for it either.
No, so Abby being underneath
Mm-hmm.
him didn't help the situation. But I just kept telling Abby, I'm not comparing you to Taylor. I'm not comparing you to your sisters. So you need to stop that.
Right.
You are smart. The fact that you are a freshman in high school and we are just now discovering this shows me how smart you are.
Right.
So, and dyslexic people are very smart.
Yes.
You know what I'm
I was
saying?
going to say dyslexia. And I think that's, there's a lot of myths around dyslexia. One is that, you read words backwards or you see letters backwards. Oh, my child flips B and D. That is one of the first thing parents are email me all the time. And my child flips B and D. Do you think they're dyslexic? I'm like, no, absolutely not. It's actually how our brain is trained to recognize objects that if I take your pair of glasses and I flip them upside down, they're still a pair of glasses.
Right.
If I flip them on the side, they're still a pair of glasses. We actually have to untrain our brain that the letters B, D, P, and Q are not the same thing.
Right.
And so it's really a process of untraining your brain. So I wouldn't even say until second grade, your child is probably going to flip those letters around some. Another myth is that dyslexic people are not intelligent. And it's actually
the opposite.
Most of our dyslexic children are very intelligent. And that's why they go so long, usually until about third grade before they're detected because they figure out how to mask it. They will figure out strategies to learn words. And I mean, look at me. I didn't know until I was an adult.
Yes.
And I figured out, I don't even know how. I just remember reading always being so hard. I remember crying over projects. I remember everything taking me so much longer than everyone else. And so, because dyslexic children are usually intelligent, it is hard to catch sometimes. And I think the state of Georgia, so the science of reading movement is just so great because teachers are getting trained in these things to recognize it earlier. The state of Georgia and so many other states have actually passed legislation around this. Georgia, great. It's called the Early Literacy Act, and it's any child who doesn't do well on their initial universal screener coming in will have to have some kind of test to look for signs of dyslexia in kindergarten through third grade within the first 60 days of the school year.
Wow.
So it's we're getting really proactive about it. And I think that is becoming nationwide. It's just taking a while to get all the teachers trained, because for a long time we taught reading with this strategy called whole word reading. So memorizing a lot of sight words and
Emily's face.
Just all the things. If anyone's listened to the podcast Sold a Story, you will learn all of these things. It's a really good listen to understand this change that we're making in education. But it was all about memorizing words and teaching kids guessing strategies. So like, if I see a picture of a horse on the page and I see the word starts with P and I know like horse, another word for horse is pony, I can guess that word based on the picture. The problem with that is when you rely on pictures to read, once you hit third grade,
there's no pictures.
There's no pictures. And so that's why all of a sudden in third grade, it's like, my child was reading fine. They're reading fine. They're reading fine. Well, in third grade, you now have to read by yourself with no pictures. And you're reading to learn instead of learning to read.
So that's why Abby started showing signs in third grade. I never knew that. Thank you.
Yes.
That was wonderful. Learn something every day.
Right.
I love that. Well, give us some other early signs that parents can pick up. Let's give the parents all that we can give them today.
Okay, good. So some of the early signs of dyslexia in preschool, if your child is having hard time with rhyming words and producing rhymes. So like if you're singing a black sheep, I was just about to sing the nursery rhyme, Baba Black Sheep. If you're singing nursery rhymes over and over again, like even my 2-year-old now, he is starting to put in the missing words of a nursery rhyme if I'm singing them, or like we're reading a rhyming book. He loves the book Trashy Town right now. Pick it up, drive around the trashy town. Like I can leave a word out that's a rhyming word and he can produce it.
Yeah.
So from a very early age, that rhyming and nursery rhymes, if your child struggles with that, that's kind of a sign in the preschool age. In kindergarten, if your child is having a hard time automatically recognizing and saying their letter names and letter sounds. So if you are going through a deck of flashcards in random order just with the letters on them and they can't go, A, A, P, P, D, D, if that's not coming automatically within a split second, that's kind of one of your signs that something between the sound and where your brain recognizes the image that represents that sound is kind of getting miscommunicated. By first grade, if your child is really laboriously sounding out words, so they're looking at the word pig and they're just going pig, pig, and they just can't get it to string together finally and say pig, and you're just like sitting there like, oh my gosh, please say the word.
It's pig. It's
pig. Oh my gosh. So that's one of the signs in first grade, if they're just kind of really everything sounding out is like taking a lot of labor for their brain.
Well, quick question. As a parent, do you jump in and say pig or do you not?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
So eventually, yes, but there's kind of a process that I follow when a kid is sounding out words. So the first thing I'll do is let them try to sound it out on their own. If they get it wrong, I'll direct them back to the sounds they missed. So let's say they read pig as big. I would say, okay, go back and look at that very first sound. The letter is P. Tell me that sound. Okay, so now let's try it again with that sound. But if they're really like, they're sitting there going, pig, 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 and just like never getting there, be like, okay, let's stretch it, pig. Now snap it together for me, pig. Okay, the word's big, because eventually it's just frustrating for everybody if they're not there. But yes, you want to direct back to correcting the individual sound that they miss and then see if they can fill it in. But, some words don't follow those sounds. So then we have the rule breaker words. And another thing is if they haven't been taught the pattern. So let's say they're reading the word shark and you've never taught them AR for the R sound. You can sound it out a million times, but they don't know AR makes the sound R. They're not going to be able to sound it out.
Right.
So
that makes sense.
Depends on the word.
Emily, I'm loving how giddy you are over here. Emily is about to come out of her chair.
I just think it's so cool because I do think that for a little while, people weren't focusing on phonics.
Yes.
And I do think phonics helps the kids. It helps the teachers because it's kind of like, I don't know, I feel like it's kind of like a rule book for reading. And And
it's the code.
And it just helps these kids.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I did have some third graders who are in the whole language, and I'm like, oh gosh, and they're not only is their reading terrible, but their spelling is terrible. I'm like, oh, this is terrible. But, it's exciting because it's going to set these kids up for so much success.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yes, I am giddy. I'm like, this is so good.
Yes. And I mean, and that's the other, when we talk about like a late reader versus a struggling reader, that's the other thing I forgot to mention is that sometimes a late reader is a late reader because they didn't have proper instruction. And it's not the fault of the teachers. It's that the teachers haven't been trained in how to. So if you're a parent and your school is not aligning with the science of reading, those might be questions not to go attack the teacher with, but to just present to the principal, like, oh, are y'all going to align your practices with the science of reading? What phonics program do you follow? What's the scope and sequence for that phonics program so we can work on these skills at home too? Because not every district is there yet. It is new. It's like something that kind of came out of COVID. And so even my district that's 3 years into this now, we still have teachers who have taught the way they taught forever and are having to rethink their practices of how they're going to teach kids to read. And so I actually had a student who came into first grade last year. She had been at kindergarten somewhere else, and the parents came in and they were like, she is struggling. We don't know what it is. We want her tested. And so we went ahead and tested her, and it came back that she had no reading disability. And it turns out that she just didn't really have reading instruction in kindergarten at her previous school. It was a school that was kind of more of a preschool environment. And so I started doing intervention with her like the first week of school, and she made over a year's growth in one semester.
Wow.
So it wasn't that she was a struggling reader. It was just that no one
wasn't
taught her.
Yeah.
Right. So that's another bucket of kids that maybe they haven't been taught the code to read.
That's a great point. Like when Emily and Kelsey, we lived in Virginia, and the public school system back then did whole language, and I wanted them to know phonics. So we pulled them out when they never went. I just put them in a private school, and it was hard to even afford the private school at the time. But I just told Greg, they have to learn phonics.
Yes,
like they have to learn phonics. So, and the only people in our area that was doing that was the Christian private school.
Yes,
so that's what we did,
and we found that to be true in a lot of places in the United States. And I think that's a good point too, that a lot of parents, so the reading crisis that we're in, we've got this huge statistic of fourth graders who aren't able to read. And we might have to look up the number to put in the notes or something. I think it's 63% or something, 2/3 of fourth graders in the national reading panel evaluation, they found that they couldn't read at the level that they should be reading, couldn't read proficiently. And so that also kind of started this whole thing. And as we dove deeper, a lot of affluent families weren't seeing the same struggle because parents, even if the kids weren't getting the phonics instruction at school, parents were giving it to their children,
at
maybe
home.
Even passively at home. But when they would sit down and read with their child, because parents were kind of taught using phonics,
of course.
Right? They would be reading a book and they would help them sound it out. And the kid would be like, oh, okay. So like you said the word shark and you told me these sounds. Now I can apply those sounds to other things.
Right.
So passively, a lot of kids kind of got that phonics instruction that maybe weren't getting it in school.
Yeah,
so we didn't realize
sense.
That we weren't teaching the right way for a lot of kids because they were getting it somewhere else.
Okay.
Interesting. So are there any strategies that you would say kind of lean in towards this and pull away from certain strategies?
For sure. So we definitely want to, for those early grade levels, we want to be teaching phonics-based instruction. So following a sequential scope and sequence for your child to read. I have a lot of resources on that on my Instagram and website if you want to check it out. But a lot of games. So lean into the games.
Okay.
Like it is hard for a beginning reader because they're not good at reading. It's not fun for them. Like it's struggle for their brain. And so one of my favorite games, and this is like the easiest thing, you can either do it on note cards or popsicle sticks, whatever skill your child is working on. So let's say they're working on short vowel A, and you take words and just write them on the popsicle stick and then put a few sticks in there that say the word zap. And you pull the stick, read the word, and then if you get a zap, you have to put them all back. And so you have to keep playing because every time you get a zap, you refill your popsicle sticks. And so that is a very easy game to make at home, and it's very quick. You can also do it on note cards if you don't want to get popsicle sticks. And then just reading to your child. So every night or whenever you can, read them fun stories, lean into that. And let me see, I wrote something else down here, maybe to lean into or not to do. So, okay. So another thing that kids really love is anything multisensory. So when you're learning the letter sounds and letter names, write them in sidewalk chalk, put shaving cream on your table or on a tray and let them write the letters in that. I have kids write and say letter names in sand a lot. So that makes it really fun for kids. And then just as many games as you can play. Zingo has a word reading game.
I love Zingo. You have it at your house.
I do.
It's so fun. Yeah. We have the picture one at home. I actually need to get the word reading one for my kindergartner, but that's a fun game. And when I say games, I would avoid the iPad games. So there's a lot of reading apps and things, you might need some screen time for your child so you can cook dinner or whatever. And so if you can put them on an educational app, that's great over some silly show that's, not teaching them anything. But the best thing that you can do is play games with them and be their teacher. That's better than any iPad app or show that they can watch. Things we want to avoid is just memorizing a bunch of words and teaching our kids those guessing strategies that I talked about earlier. So when kids get that list of sight words, it is good to practice those, but you really want to practice them, teach them the parts that they can sound out and teach them just to memorize the parts they can't. So for the word said, for example, the S and the D in that word follow the sound spelling rule. Okay. The AI is making the sound, which is kind of a rule breaker. So when I teach that word, I say to kids, okay, S is making the sound S, you know that sound. D at the end is making the sound D, you know that sound. And this word, AI, is not following its rule. It's making the sound So that's kind of how I teach those sight words instead of just here's the flashcards, let's say them a million times and memorize them. Yeah. And let's see. I don't know what else. Start early.
Yeah.
Start early.
I love that. Well, you have so many resources, and I would just love to tell the moms, how can they find you? And tell us about your Instagram and your accounts and things like that, and then where our moms can find your resources online.
Sure. So my Instagram handle is Little Literacy Nook. You can also go to littleliteracynook.com. I have a lot of free resources. I have some online courses. If you feel I want to teach my child, but I don't know how to provide that instruction piece, I have some recorded videos on how you provide, or I can provide the instruction, and then you can follow up with the activities. I have a book called Teach Me to Read. It's on Amazon. You can just search Teach Me to Read, Welsley Jongko. And then one other thing that I would love to share. So I just became an in-house literacy expert for Love Every. I don't know if y'all know the little
I do, yeah.
play kits.
Yeah.
So they just created the reading skill set, and it is it's pricey, but it's wonderful. It's this boxed sets of games and activities and decodable reading books that you can
so
buy.
Cool.
Yes, it's amazing. It really is. When I saw it, I was like, this is a phenomenal product.
That's so good.
So that's a good thing, if you're looking to invest in some things you can do at home with your child.
All right.
That's awesome.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I know the mothers have loved, and the dads have loved listening to you and learning from you. And I'm so appreciative that you're Birds on a Wire mom, and you reached out, and I reached out, and we're in each other's world.
That's right. Well,
and you and Emily
so
are going to be
much.
best friends.
Yes,
I just know it.
From now on.
Yes, can't wait.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really just an honor to be here in your presence and,
thank you.
And be on the show. I appreciate it. Your book has gotten me through a lot of things.
Oh, good.
Your podcast has
Well,
too, so
thank
it's been
you.
wonderful.
I'm doing my part. You're doing your part.
That's right.
I love it. I love it.
Well, everyone, thank you so much for listening to Wire Talk. Don't forget to give Little Literacy Nook a follow so you can be filled with wonderful resources. If you've liked this episode, please share it with another friend, mom, parent, someone who would benefit from all of these amazing resources and things that we've learned today. And we will see you next week. Thank you so much. Bye.